Okay, thank you. Well, let me do the introduction once again. The purpose of this afternoon's discussion is how can Norway, as the leading marine country, help develop and boost marine research and innovation in other parts of the world. Delighted to have on stage here three colleagues from Norway, going from left to right, Øyvind, Christina and Carl. What I'd like to do is just hand over at the beginning, please, just starting with Øyvind, just to introduce themselves and to say a little bit about the organizations that they work for and the role that they play in the biomarine industry in Norway. Øyvind.
My name is Øyvind Fylling Jensen. I'm the CEO of Nofima in Norway, based in Tromsø up in the north, but with 5 different research departments. We are an applied research organization with about 360 employees, with more than 200 researchers, and a turnover of 520 million NOK, around 65 million euros. We are set up to help industry create value from research and use that as a leverage to increase their own competitiveness. It's a non-profit-making or not dividend-paying organization, so whatever we make in surplus is channeled back into continuation of research. And in the biomarine field, we are involved in aquaculture development along the whole value chain, in processing plants, in pilot plants for utilization of marine resources.
Øyvind, thank you very much. Now, Christina.
My name is it on? Yes?
I don't think so. Hello? This microphone's not working, guys.
I think it's working. Is it working? Yeah. Okay. Well, my name is Christina Abildgaard, and I'm a director in the Research Council of Norway, and I'm heading a department of marine bioresources and environment. The Research Council of Norway is a key player in the R&D system in Norway. We are giving strategic advice to the government. We are a funding agency, funding all kinds of research, both public and private, in all scientific fields. Our budget for 2014 is approximately 1 billion euro. We are also funding basic research and applied research. We're also concerned about collaboration, networking and dissemination, and the last years we have an increased focus on internationalization. When it comes to marine research, we fund approximately 70 million euro through different financial mechanisms. We have large-scale programs on biotechnology, on aquaculture, and thematic programs on ecosystems and so on. Also, I would like to point out that we have developed several international financial mechanisms in order to support international collaboration, which I can elaborate on a little bit later. And finally, I would like to say that marine is an area of priority, and really acknowledge that our new government just has recently launched a new white paper on research, where the ocean is one area of priority. And this, of course, will be beneficial both for the research communities and also the industry and industrial development. Thank you.
And Carl.
Yes. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and the title of this session, how can Norway contribute to development? I mean, sitting here in Portugal, which is also a huge marine nation, well, it's a special situation. But my name is Carl Olmos, and I'm a CEO of SINTEF Fisheries and Aquaculture, which is a research institute in the SINTEF group. The SINTEF group is one of 4 largest research institutes in Europe. We are about 2,100 people. Last year we did between 7,000 and 8,000 projects. We have an annual turnover of about 3 billion NOK. There are people working with us from 70 different countries in our institute, and we have customers in 60 countries, something like that. And we have a large proportion of the EU projects that are being done in Norway. SINTEF Fisheries and Aquaculture is, as the other research institutes in the SINTEF group, a contract research institute. That means we have approximately less than 10% governmental grant. The rest of our activity is contract research for private industry and for the public sector. We are a research institute focusing upon technology and technological development. And in a country like Norway, where 70 to 80% of the total export values come from not the biomarine sector, but the total maritime sector, what you can achieve from the oceans, technological development is important to develop these fields further. So I hope that with our experience we can contribute together with our European and international partners to develop the biomarine field, which is probably the one with the largest potentials further. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think what you can see from the introduction from Øyvind, Christina and Carl is not only the extent of the resources which the Norwegian government has to deploy and each of their individual institutions has to deploy, but it also speaks volumes about the importance of the biomarine sector within the Norwegian economy. I think that the question I'd like to start by asking was really a very sort of slightly more general and stepping back and taking a bit of a helicopter view. From the Norwegian perspective, what would you see as being the key opportunities and also the key challenges as the blue economy develops and expands in the coming years? Maybe start with Christina on that one.
Well, as far as I see, there must be a lot of opportunities. I think I will start with that. Because if you start with only food security, when you know that only a few % of the world's food consumptions derives from seafood, and at the same time you know that the population is projected to be around 9 billion by 2050, then it's quite obviously that you have to increase food from the oceans. And this is also generally recognized in Rio Plus 20. And I just read a report from the World Food Security Committee that had their meeting a few weeks ago, and they were enhancing the importance of seafood as to ensure food security. So I think it's a great opportunity for food production. That is one thing. Also, I think there's a great opportunity to use more of the biomass. As we have heard earlier today, there's great expectation of more higher value products by using the entire biomass from whether it's from wild catch or from aquaculture industry for pharmaceuticals or cosmetic or feed or whatever. So that's also another opportunity, I think. And also, I think because there's a high pressure on land for food production and on producing minerals or whatever, there will be more activities in the seas, and that's, of course, we have heard a lot about in blue growth and a great expectation for increase in the blue economy. So I think there are many opportunities here. But at the same time, there are challenges, and we know that because, especially when we are handling biomaterial, I mean, if we are exhausting the biomaterial, we will have Black Sea, and then it will be not possible to make income either. So you have to combine the sustainable approach. You have to know much about the ecosystem in order to handle that. So I think the challenges is sustainability, know the ecosystems, know how much you can exploit and be in a responsible way, and also to handle the different claims of the marine space because of its increased interest. But there's also a lot of opportunities. But I'll just stop by saying one thing which I heard earlier today, which I really liked, and I think that was our State Secretary that was stating that if you look into, well, you can look into challenge in many ways. You can look into challenge as an opportunity and see here we can really make economic growth, and I think that is the situation for the seas and oceans. Thank you.
Øyvind, I saw you were nodding as Christina was talking there. Is there anything you'd like to add, either in terms of opportunities or specifically challenges?
No, the opportunity lays actually in a follow-up of the Major Cascais, who said that we have explored the universe with astronauts and we've sent people to the moon. But 70% of the globe's surface is water, and we have just starting scratching the surface. In that, there is an opportunity for increased food production, for increased utilization, for energy, and natural-based energy, wind-based energy, and so forth. The challenge is on the other side, on the same side, that unless we start to grapple with sustainable fisheries, resource management, taking care of the regulatory aspects and respecting also the high seas in international waters, then you will face another fallacy. And the other challenge is that you have to develop this step by step, understanding the combination between human, socio-economic development, financial development, and last but not least, the environmental development that is taken in. If you just leave one side of that triangle out, you will probably run into even further problem going forward.
Yes. Of course, I certainly agree to the fact that there are great potentials developing the biomarine sector. I had the pleasure a couple of years ago leading a group of people, including also Christina here. We came up with a report describing the potential for the Norwegian biomarine sector in 2050. What could be the value production from productive marine waters in 2050? And we ended up with saying, well, it's about 70 billion billion euro totally. And if you look into the biomarine sector, we can very rough divide it into two. There are very established value chains, like the traditional fishery. The salmon industry is a well-established value chain. The equipment manufacturers, the feed industry, and also now the ingredient industry, I would say, is a very well-established industry. The sixth one is the knowledge industry, which is quite small, but also recognized as the one with a long tradition. And when we're working to developing these value chains, it's of course focusing upon incremental improvements. How can we improve the energy consumption in our traditional fishery? How can we avoid escapes from the salmon industry, and so on? So developing those potentials is done that way. But we have other new biomarine sectors coming up, like we are focusing upon here today. For instance, the algae production in Norway, macroalgae production, is one quite new sector in Norway. Although we have been harvesting macroalgae for many, many years, we are in the beginning of cultivating and growing this algae. The second industrial era is how to develop productive seas and oceans. We know that very nutritious water is coming up by upwelling. How can we look into this by forming structures, infrastructure, and so on, so we can utilize this for production? And the third one is new species. And in those three different industrial sectors here, we are working in another way, because there are no traditional value chains to lean on. So that's a very different matter. But totally, this area has great potentials.
Øyvind, you talked about, you used the word regulatory in your introduction and your follow-on answers to my question. I was wondering, in Norway, to what extent has the development of the regulatory framework been a component of the growth of the biomarine and the aquaculture industry, and what role has that played?
I think regulatory is absolutely required, but it has to be developed based on science and fact-based. And it has to be developed in conjunction and in collaboration with those who are fulfilling and living under the regulatory regime. So you have the triangle between the knowledge providers, the policy makers, and the industry operators. And the industry operators need a predictable and long-lasting operational framework, but it should be science-based. So they also need to interact with the knowledge providers in a bilateral way, as much as the government is interacting with the knowledge providers and the government is interacting with the industry. So this is around a circle where they are working together. And as long as you are able to develop and mitigate risk, both from an environmental and from an operational point of view, then you will be able to get a prosperity and a growing industry over time.
And Christina, I know that this is something which is close to your heart as well, the regulatory environment. What lessons do you think other countries could take from what Norway has achieved and what Norway has done in terms of setting up that regulatory environment?
Well, I totally agree with Øyvind that the regulation should be knowledge-based. And before I answer your question, I would just like to say that in the marine research in Norway, 60% is funded by the public. And that is because the management, the governmental policy making is very depending on knowledge. So, and I do think that when you look into different countries, for instance in Chile, which unfortunately had the considerable loss in around 1996 and later on illness and management problems. And I think one of the lessons learned from Norway is that you have quite specific regulations that are maybe a pain in the ass for the industry in shorthand, but which is very important in the long run. But as Øyvind points out, they must not be too far away from each other. They have to have some dialogue in order to make a sensible development, and I do think we do that. But it must be knowledge-based.
Yes, I agree, but I should like to add that what is actually characterizing the Norwegian, what should I say, biomarine community, for to say, is that there is a strong cooperation between the regulatory authorities, the scientists and the industry. And sometimes we have to go out of Norway to realize that back home actually we are not that bad in cooperating. And sometimes it's the regulatory authorities that are going out setting strict rules. But it also happens that the industry is going out saying to the regulatory authorities, you should be more strict in what you are planning now. So I think it's a good cooperation.
Øyvind, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, and following up on Christina's point is that if this is to be knowledge-based, then you also have to put in place a financial system that allows you to build competence and knowledge on areas that might not be as in demand by the industry in the short term, but where you have to have a kind of precautionary principle on your knowledge basis, because in the future that knowledge will be used to enhance the industry. And at the same time you have to work with the politicians to not only run into what you call short-term quarterly myopia, but you have to have some kind of long-term financing of the knowledge base, which is very, very important to develop this further.
I think everybody's very familiar with Norway as being the world's dominant salmon producer. Carl, you touched on value chain, and you were talking about other areas where the biomarine industry is developing in Norway. I wonder if you could just give a bit more flavor to that, so microalgae and other developments. How is that other part of the biomarine industry developing in Norway today?
Well, I think that we have learned some lessons during the years we have behind us. If we go back to 1970, more than 40 years ago, two things, very important things happened in Norway. We discovered the oil, and after 18 months from the discovery of oil, we were in industrial production. The same year, the fish farmers started on an island outside Trondheim with putting the first fishes into cages. But we needed 30 years before we realized that aquaculture is actually a big industry. So now when we are supposed to start these new industries, new value chains, for instance, the production of microalgae, we can choose. Should we go ahead like we did when we developed the oil industry? Or should we discuss for 30 years, is this going to be an industry or not? So, I would say that these days we are in a discussion about how to start these new value chains. It's not easy, but I hope that we will land on some good decisions so we don't have to have this 30-year perspective on that.
That link between governments and industry and through your own institutions, I think the State Minister, is the fact that she's here is clearly indicative of the commitment by the Norwegian government to the biomarine industry. The next question, therefore, would be, when you look across all of the available opportunities within biomarine and the way things could go as the blue economy develops, where do you believe the priorities exist today from a Norwegian perspective for your own economy? Perhaps start with Christina on that one.
Well, one of the areas of priority when it comes to research is, of course, aquaculture. And we have a large-scale program on aquaculture and are developing a new one, and that's for 10 years, ensuring a long, secure financing for a long time. So aquaculture will still be a high area of priority. And also safe seafood, which also will, of course, cover wild catch. So I think in addition to this, we are looking more into now cross-cutting approaches. Like, we do believe that if there are collaborative possibilities between the maritime industries, the offshore oil and gas industries, and offshore, for instance, renewable energy industries and aquaculture. So we are trying to stimulate some cross-cutting approaches there. We do think that might be an area of growth. And in addition, there's also an area of priority that we should use the entire biomass. We are fascinated by the bioeconomy approach, and we think that's decisive for ensuring a more greener growth economy. Yes, and of course, also marine bioprospecting is including in this priority.
Carl?
Yes. When it concerns the cross-cutting areas here, I think that we have been through a change. If we go 10, 20 years ago, we thought, well, there is a strong similarity between the agricultural production and the fish harvesting and production. I think now we are realizing that, well, there is, of course, some synergetic effects to take out here. But we see today that, for instance, what has happened in the oil and gas industry, what's happened in the ICT industry, what's happening in the material industry in Norway, and also the energy production industry, is actually now being taken into the over value chain, the aquaculture value chain and the traditional fish catching value chain. For instance, energy is how can we develop a more sustainable wild catch? Energy consumption is very important. So I think the biomarine value chain had a lot to learn from these industries. On the other hand, we also have the emerging technologies, like the nanotechnology, the biotechnology, the ICT. Those, what should I say, technological paradigm changes is also bringing some strong impact to our possibility of developing this value chain. And the final one is well, the interaction between technology and biomass. And I think that's where this industry has actually to be in the forefront itself, because we cannot relate on anybody else to develop that for us.
Linked to that, then, as a follow-on question, Oyvind, this one to you. You all, in your three institutions, you've got a significant number of projects which you are involved in. I wonder if you could just give a flavor on the international scope of those projects. So what's happening outside of Norway? Who are you talking to? What sort of projects are you getting involved in? What's the scope and what's the direction of those projects?
A good and a difficult question to answer. We are currently involved in 41, 42 EU projects, which is very important. A challenge with international collaboration in this area is that it's only recently that we start seeing the oceans as a key European focus area, and the call texts are starting to come out now. But we are working with French institutions, we're working with Spanish institutions, we're working with Irish institutions, and hopefully in the future also much more closely with Portuguese institutions. But it has to be because of our approach of looking at growing an industry. We need industry partners as a part in those projects to create value, and not only the scientific value. That's something which is the key goal of the universities, whereas we want to build new and sustainable and powerful, profitable industries. So if going forward, the politicians, they have to stand up and to say the ocean is important in the long-term plan, and they just have to follow up also with the financial resources to enable this industry to grow. Like Carl is saying, we can decide whether we want it to take 30 years or 18 months, and that's a matter of public-private financing, make it an attractive investment opportunity.
And Christina, I wonder if some specific examples, if you had any specific examples of particular projects which have gone really well, and what made them such a success in your eyes from the perspective of the Research Council of Norway?
Well, I don't know if I should mention a specific project, but I would like to mention that a lot of our financial mechanisms, for instance, the aquaculture program, 80% of those projects have international collaboration. 90% of the projects in the ecosystem program has international collaboration. And we do recognize that international collaboration enhances quality and critical mass, and also when it comes to infrastructure. So we really believe that international collaboration is important. And that's why we are, well, our government now has launched or proposed for the state budget for 2015 a quite considerable increase in financial mechanisms in order to stimulate international collaboration. And Horizon 2020 is one very important arena for collaborating, of course. And also we are concerned about bilateral collaboration with North America, Asia, China, India, Japan, just to mention a few, Brazil also. So I think the main message from me, from the Research Council, is that please find each other. There are opportunities to receive financial support in order to promote this. And there are many examples of successful projects.
Yes. In SINTEF, approximately 15% of our turnover is what we call international projects, including EU project. That makes up to about 100 million euro or something like that altogether. But the problem today is that the financial situation when you go into EU projects are not satisfactory, at least to SINTEF. So although we have the largest amount of EU projects in Norway, we try to keep, we don't let that to increase too much, because then we are in an economical problem. But on the other hand, we are also doing a lot of work trying to be part of the European community to develop the strategic research agendas, for instance, for the aquaculture industry. So the European aquaculture technology and innovation platform we have been part of since it was established, well, it must soon be 10 years ago. So that is a forum that we are very active in. We also try to participate and contribute in other parts of the world. For instance, we have a subsidiary down in Chile, which actually had quite a tough start because the Chilean industry was going down. But after many years, that's also been quite successful, not only from Norwegian point of view to contribute to development of the Chilean aquaculture industry, but also the other way around. I think in the future we will see more of international cooperation from SINTEF point of view.
And Christina, you mentioned bilateral development with some of the developing economies in the world. You mentioned China and Asia Pacific. I wonder if you could just give a little bit more perspective on that. How involved are you? How do you go about finding and cooperating with people outside of the more traditional involvement with, say, European countries?
Well, the usual way is that the scientists find each other. And sometimes you need some help from the governmental authorities. So we are developing MOUs, for instance. And we have MOUs with several countries. And also we are now developing a specific financial mechanism to support more long-living institutional cooperation, which you can have support to establish that kind of activity. And that could be, of course, outside Europe. And we will, typically it's possible to receive money for networking. That's the easiest way. But we do also have scholarships where we can invite young scientists to Norway. And I must say that a lot of our centers, we have centers for excellence and centers for research driven innovation and so on, and they really recruit scientists and young people from outside the world. So I think there are quite several kinds of financial mechanisms. So, but I must also say that if you should receive a grant, you must be good. There's a hard competition, and of course some of these networks support is not really always of quality decisive, but when you have a project, it's really hard competition. But we believe that there are a lot to gain here in international collaboration.
So none of this is guaranteed. If there is a grant given, there are deliverables, and whoever that grant is given to has to deliver against those deliverables, is what you're saying, I assume.
Yeah, you must deliver, but you must have a Norwegian contact. You can't be just a research scientist or in industry applying directly to the research council, but I mean, you have these lovely institutes here, and you will have partners, and you, through specific project application you can apply, but there must be Norwegian.
Why didn't you?
I love being called a lovely institute, thank you. But I think when it comes to internationalization, there are a few things. First of all, it has to be anchored at the top of the institute, and you have to put some priorities, because you can't just go in, try to do something, and go out again. You have to have a persistence, like Carl said. In Chile, been working for years, and it's only when you are able to stand the long term. And then you have to be very careful that your scientists are not running in all different directions, but actually say, if we put priority to Portugal, then we mean Portugal, and then we should support it from within over a longer period of time. You might not get the results the first day, but you might get it in years 2 or 3, and that's extremely important, the strategic anchoring in the top management.
I would say that generally we have too many MOUs. I think in our institute we have more than 30 MOUs that has been signed during the years for different reasons. One of the reasons is that we have been invited by Norwegian authorities, going out in a delegation, visiting some country somewhere, and signing an MOU with this country for research. But after this MOU is signed, there is, well, lack of resources. How do we develop that? So in the last 10 years, we have been much more selective to what kind of cooperation we go into. And when we make such a decision, we put much more resources into each and every one of them to actually get something out of it. And it's always a question of more than 10 years. So I remember I signed an MOU with the Minister of Fisheries in Uganda many years ago, having a plan to develop 100,000 of tons of aquaculture production in that lake. Well, the MOU was signed, and that was it. So we should not go into too many relations like that.
I suppose if you're in the audience and you're looking at the three institutions that you represent, one question could be, how do I connect with you and who should I connect with? Maybe start with Øyvind. How would you answer that question to somebody who was interested in connecting with you?
Nofima, we have an excellent website. It's www.nofima.no. If you go in there, you will find what we do, who is doing it, links to scientific papers or merits, and also the researcher you can interact with directly. I don't like being the bottle stopper, and please do not mail me unless you want to talk to me, but take direct contact with our organization at the lowest possible level. These are the people who are doing the good and excellent job every day.
Well, the Research Council has also web pages, and we have English web pages, so there you can find the financial mechanisms. And you will also have contact persons, for instance, if you are interested in climate or biotechnology or whatever, you will have specific persons that you can contact and to get some advice on how to go on. But as I said, we will be a receiver of an application. That's a normal procedure, and then we will evaluate that application. So you will first start them.
Yes, I can lean on what Øyvind said here. We also have a web page. It's probably not as good as the Nofima web page, but it's certainly well worth to go in there. Also, I would say that in a scientific community or a research institute, the projects are being created not on top level, but among the scientists. That's where the process is going. That's where the what should I say, the income is made, and so on. So I think to go into the SINTEF webpage, what is your interest, and then go right on the scientists responsible for the relevant thema. That's okay, but if you go to me, I will send immediately or message to the right research director or whatever responsible for that field.
Just one additional point. That of course the Research Council, we organize a lot of different workshops and seminars and so on, which is also on the web pages. So they are very often open to everybody. So and they are in Norway or abroad. So that's also a way of coming in contact with research communities that you might not know as much. So that's a good way also.
We are drawing a little bit short of time, and I can see Pierre hovering in the background. Before he jumps on me and grabs the microphone, I've just got one more question, and something we talked about over coffee earlier. Do you think this requires people? Do you think there are enough good people being attracted into the biomarine industry to make all of this happen?
I think this is one of the biggest challenges that this industry is facing. We are competing with young talent, with other industries in all different sectors. And unless we start at the schools talking positively about the opportunities that we have in the marine and biomarine sectors, until we start bringing the oceans into the educational system and take it into the university, and you give the people who graduate from high schools, polytechnic colleges, universities, a career opportunity with a stable income, we will not succeed. So it's a key issue, and that's why we are open to receive people, to be a hosting organization for a shorter or longer period of time, to educate people to this fantastic industry with a great opportunity.
Christina, I know this is close to your heart as well, so what one of you would like to add to that?
Well, I think from the Research Council point of view, of course we are developing financial mechanisms in order to get young scientists in the marine area. But I think the problem is before. I think it is, you must address the school, and I know that some of the large-scale programs have in fact invited young people young students in their project in order to make them a bit more familiar to research before they are at an earlier stage. So I think you should start before PhD and you should start at the schools.
Yes. Well, I have recognized that, what should I say, a change during the last 5 years or something. When people are asking questions, well, what's the future for the oil and gas industry? And in a company like Sintef, we actually are recruiting mainly engineers, all kind of type. We see that there is not a problem getting people into a research institute like others. And I think that this field, when you talk about sustainability, when you talk about the global challenges, when you're talking about feed the generations to come, it's very, well, it's appealing. And when I interview new people starting in our research institute, they are very much focusing upon that. So I think from a recruiting point of view, I think we have a great future.
We really are now getting very close to the end, and Pierre's got his bow and arrow, and I can see him lining up and taking shots. Look, I'd just like to thank all three of you very, very much. I think for me, the message that's coming out of this is that, yes, Norway is a centre of excellence. Yes, it has a very strong place in the world, in the biomarine industry globally. But the Research Council of Norway, Nofima and Sintef have significant funds to deploy. They want to deploy it, and they're looking for people to collaborate and effectively do business with. And I hope that you would agree that that is the message perhaps to close this session on. Thank you very much indeed.